How can you thrive in a time of crisis? Hey listeners, welcome to In the Arena. I'm Jackie Goldberg.
And I'm Leah Smart. And today we are joining you from our living rooms. So, as many of all of us know, we are currently in, the middle of a pandemic. And, Jackie and I wanted to continue this podcast, continue this recording, and really believing that we actually need this more than ever right now. So, I hope that, first of all of you are safe, sound, and, with family or connecting with family as much as you can. What we're going to talk about today is really what has our journey been like through this process, talking about some of the hardships, of course, that are happening. When we were talking earlier, it was kind of like, how do we create gratitude with massive perspective of the fact that everyone's going through something so different right now, but really wanted to share our perspectives and hopefully shine some light into some of the dark corners of what is going on today, and then leave you hopefully with some practices around how you can thrive during this time. And this is, again, so our perspective, and again, wanting to have incredible gratitude for, this time, and also the perspective of what's going on for everyone else in the world too.
Yeah, and this is, they keep using the word, Leah, unprecedented, and it really does feel that way. We've never had an episode where we spoke about something going on right now in the world, and how it was affecting us. And to your point before around finding the light in the dark times, this is a really difficult time for everyone in so many ways. And we all have our unique stories and our own challenges and way that we're dealing with things. And yet, whenever there is darkness, we know that we can always find some sort of light and silver lining, and even maybe come out of this a little bit better. I love that you said we need to talk about this, because we do. It is so important to share your feelings and your emotions and how you're going through this time with your loved ones. And we're excited to really be here with our listeners today and share as much as we can on what's going on in the world. Before we get started though, Leah, I think it's, you and I you mentioned gratitude. We just want to put out there in the world how much gratitude we have for all of the essential workers on the front lines in the fire right now, the healthcare workers, our government, people who are really making this country, but really the world running and keeping it running, while a lot of us are working from home or out of a job, unfortunately, and just so much gratitude. So big thank you to everyone who's listening to this and who knows someone who is on the front lines, because we really do appreciate all the work that you're doing.
Amen.
Amen. So what has this process been like for you, Leah? And I just want to give context. Today is March 25th, 2020. The coronavirus started in November, December in Wuhan in China. And every day it seems like something is changing, and the effect that it's having on the world, all the way into our own living rooms and into us as individuals, is changing almost hour by hour, right? So you and I actually were talking about the other day how there are a lot of podcasts right now talking about COVID-19. And when you listen to them a week later, they almost seem out of date, right? So hopefully what we talk about today will withstand time, because we're talking about crises in general and using the current situation to inform that. But what has it been like for you over the past several weeks as it's hit the US, and then specifically New York, where we both are, and right now is the epicenter. We have the most cases at this current point in time in the United States.
So, it's funny, Jackie, you said a few days ago that it was just 2 weeks ago when we were in San Francisco together, getting ready to go to an event that was a really awesome event we were excited about, called Wisdom 2.0. And we had been gearing up for that for quite a while. And then all of a sudden it happened. And it hit the US, and people started really taking it seriously, including LinkedIn, which was really valuable. And then from there, we read this quote and I shared it with you, but the quote was, "What a year this week has been," because the week it feels like years ago that happened, and that was just the beginning of the month. Coming back to New York for me it felt like the right thing. Really, I've sort of stepped into this feeling of doing my part and making sure that I'm social distancing and those types of things. And those feelings hit me really when I was back in San Francisco around close friends and recognizing the vulnerability of the immune systems of their parents. That was a really big shift for me. It was like, wow, I actually play a part. I matter. I'm part of this equation. And how can I do that? How can I play that part? And so that was like the first personal kind of feeling around it. And I'm sure you felt the same. I mean, our impact is so huge in this, and every single person does matter. But then, went through the kind of different stages of feeling like, I was excited actually and energetic to have time to myself personally, really just getting to think more and recalibrate on what I wanted to do with myself, with my life, and, go deep. But then also had this feeling of, gosh, am I thinking about this the right way? Should I be going home? I mean, you've been in New York too. There was a period of about a week where grocery stores were empty, serious supplies were missing, and it was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the point you make around impact is such a big one, because I think what I, have really realized is just how interconnected we all are, and how each person can have such an impact on the way that this virus is spreading or not spreading. And so, we got an email from LinkedIn, our head of HR, when we were in San Francisco. And really, it was the first email that really showed we're making some changes in terms of how we operate at the company, with people working from home and office shutdowns and so forth. And I just remember laying in my hotel room and reading that email and crying. And really, it was because I felt like this is so much bigger than me. And I know a lot of people have felt during this time a lack of a sense of control. And we know it is almost our human nature to want to know, but everything is so uncertain in general, right? But right now specifically. And so recognizing that we don't have control over a lot, but we do have control on how we respond and how we handle it. And that moment, I felt a really big sense of compassion, like my heart was almost coming out of me, like being like, this is bigger than myself. But it wasn't until I got back to New York, a few days later, and really felt it individually. I live in a small apartment in Manhattan by myself with my dog, right? And so working from home was really challenging that first week. It gives me so much energy to be in an office with a lot of people every day, to feel that human connection. I thrive off that. And so it was such a shift for me. And I felt like it could really go either way. I could get into like a full out depression, being by myself and isolated and not having that connection, or I can, really make the most of this time. And thankfully, I've have, the awareness to make the most of this time. And so after that first week of recognizing what it was doing to me, I used my own sense of control and how I can handle the situation to get out of it. And that's what we really want to focus on today, is how can you really thrive in a time that is so different? Our whole lives are reoriented right now, and where it's not the normal, quote unquote, that we're used to. And so how do we live this new normal? And I will say I'm in a much better place now, accepting. There's a lot of acceptance there as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked a little bit about like the stages of grief, and in some ways it does feel like that, right? And you can see it played out in others too, and where they are, whether it's denial and wanting to continue their lives as usual. And gosh, has it been hard for me not to judge people who don't seem to be playing their part, right? And it's just part of life. We're all going to be in different stages, and so I'm really working to have, reverence. Maybe I don't respect what they're doing, but at least to have honor for the fact that we're all in different stages. But, you called out a really important turning point for you. And I think I went into it with a lot of energy and like, oh my gosh, this is going to be great. And then had a real big moment of, oh my God, this is a serious problem. And then last Friday, I noticed that I was feeling resentment and anger, and I'm not typically an angry person. And so I was like, something's going on here. And what I recognized is that I hadn't yet just allowed myself to mourn the experience of what was going on. For me, March and April are going to be really big months, personally, professionally. And all of those things were basically pulled out of me or pulled away from me in just a few moments. So I allowed myself over the weekend just to mourn the loss. And that's what's allowed me to come back to this energy I started with a very different sense of grounding, is really just the process of processing what's going on, naming that this is hard, and then allowing myself to reframe and decide, all right, what now?
I love it. I mean, I think that is so key, right? You said, something is going on here. You were aware enough to see that something was off and and you looked into it. And I think that's the opportunity that we all have here is that in this new normal, we are staying put a lot more, right? So things
We
are
are.
slowing down. And think about how many times we say, especially as New Yorkers, we just want things to slow down. So now things are slowing down, but what happens is that things come up for us. And if you're not aware and then addressing them as you did in terms of your morning, what was going on in terms of the loss with a lot of the things you had planned over the next month or so, you won't get through it, right? You'll end up just pushing it down. And then a lot of those emotions come out like anger and resentment and they stick. And then if
Mhm.
you're living with other people, that can really come out to those as well. And so I think it's so important, right? Something is going on here. What is it? And let me use this time of slowing down and just being still and really in isolation for the most part, right? So shelter in place to look within and to do this inner work. And when we talk about healing as individuals, but healing with the world the world healing because of this, it starts with us. But that is really a first step. Things are coming up
Yeah.
for us every day, right? While we're in this new state of the way things are.
Yeah, and whatever is coming up, we have to be with our shadows now. We don't have as many distractions as we used to have, or as many things we can go do, particularly in larger cities where this is, experience where we're experiencing the biggest impact, right? And one thing that you said is like, doing this deep work and really spending time. Jackie, you and I are both fortunate enough to live alone in New York with our dogs and to have the space to be able to do this work. And so, we recognize not everyone has that, but encourage you to find some space. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason is, I was recently reading a Harvard Business Review article about grief. And they were talking about the fact that what you're feeling right now, that discomfort could easily be grief. And it actually solidified what my weekend was, which was grieving and mourning. But the beautiful thing was, if you're familiar with the 5 stages of grief, they've actually added a 6th stage of grief, which is called meaning. And I was so struck by this after reading this because generally the last stage of grief is acceptance, right? So, you go through this process and you finally just accept, all right, I'm here and this is me, right? And that felt so, when I read meaning and really understood it, it felt so complacent to stop at acceptance, right? Because acceptance is just saying, all right, this is it. But meaning is, wow, how do I go deeper and find what I can do now and why this is happening and really create this, this more optimistic approach, not pretend Pollyanna approach, but optimistic approach to what's going on.
Oh my goodness, that is amazing. And it's funny because I used the word acceptance before, not realizing that I was stopping there, right? And I love that meaning. And I want to get back to that, but I do want to go back to one thing you said is around how you and I are live alone, and we're fortunate to have, I guess, the space or the silence really to do this inner work and this time. But I also want to say that, everyone has their own story. And so some people may look at us and say, "Oh my God, I feel terrible. They live alone. Like they don't have." Even my mom said it to me yesterday. We don't have the family and the kids and the husbands and extended family in our apartments or our homes to make things lively and energetic, right? We have to kind of create that for ourselves through things like FaceTiming with friends and connecting with others. But I say this because 2 reasons. One, we all have our own situations that we're dealt with and where we are in life at this stage. And that will certainly impact how we can do some of this work or how we will be during this time. But I also want to say that you don't have to be alone in order to make some space for this. And I'll give an example. A colleague of mine, something she said, 2 things was, one, like her and her husband always, say all we want to do is for things to slow down and to have more time with our kids. They have 3 kids. And now they do, right? Things are slowing down. They have more times with their kids. And this weekend she shared that on Sunday they were in the backyard and just stayed all day at the house. Usually they'd be going out and about and doing errands and trying to find activities for the kids. And she said, because it's shelter in place, we just stayed in the house, and we just stayed outdoors, really connected with nature. She did a yoga class, an at-home yoga class in her backyard, and she laid on the ground and she closed her eyes. And this was in California, and she had the sun shining on her face, and she can hear her kids running around and her husband, and she was at peace. And she was like, wow, this feels good, right? So regardless of who you're surrounded with and how many people there are those little moments that you could take advantage of to slow down, to be in nature, to really fill yourself up with the calmness of being and not doing. Because we always talk about, right, that difference between doing, or just being, and being who you are and being still, and taking in the joys, those small joys of life.
Oh, that's such a good story. I mean, you've talked a lot about slowing down in this whole process and being, and how do we just allow, right? We spend so much time not just being, we spend so much time figuring out what's next on our to-do list. And it's sort of how we end up in places we don't mean to end up, right? Like I was thinking about this earlier this week or last weekend was, how many times have I written a to-do list and not actually checked it over to see if this is how I intend to live my life or how I intend to spend my time? And so how cool that your friend was able to just be with her family and just, I was totally envisioning hanging out in a backyard and going, oh, that would be so nice just to be and not have all these activities and things lined up, because that's what we equate to a successful life or a good life, right? It's how do you run from place
it's
to
what we're
place.
used to, right? It's what we do. It's what we used to. And so now our lives have shifted. And so we need to shift with that. And yet there's so much beauty that comes with it, right? And you're talking about meaning, and it's like, well, what meaning can be found in slowing down and just being? I mean, what comes up for me is just this stronger connection to nature, right? Like, I truly believe that this coronavirus is a way for people to get in touch with nature a little bit, because you can go outside as long as you're practicing social distancing, but nature is balance and connecting us to something outside. So when we're in isolation, we do need to get that fresh air, that sunlight. And so the meaning of nature, I think family, right? And the level of connection that has increased over the past, I mean, again, we're living it for the past few weeks or so I'll talk about our experience, but I mean, you're now texting and FaceTiming and talking to people that you may not have spoken to in a while, but you're thinking about all these people now because you have the space and energy to do that, and you care. And these people can come back into your life that you hadn't spoken to in a while, but it just shows the value of connection and the meaning that this can bring to that. I'm curious, you're thinking of in terms of the meaning that this is bringing to us all.
So yeah, I look at, I mentioned the to-do list earlier. I think there's probably 5 things that you and I have spoken about, but that have been really, really alive for me. And you've mentioned a few. So, connection is one. How do we connect with people in a world where we can't spend a lot of time with them physically? And, things like I did a virtual dinner last week with 2 friends. We were meant to have a real dinner and decided let's do virtual and play our part. And I was really proud of us for doing that. And, I FaceTime. I'm not a FaceTimer typically. I'll do it sometimes, but it's just not my go-to. I FaceTimed so many people in the last 2 weeks. So building that connection, and then even, the connection with strangers or with people that you're not as close to that are in maybe your periphery, your circle of friends, they're on the outside of it. If I think of someone, I do my best to just text them right now and just say, hey, thinking of you. You don't have to say anything more. Or being on the street now and looking across the street and smiling at someone. As you know, Jackie, people do not smile at each other in New York City. If someone
Not
smiles
often.
at you, you think they're creepy. So, but it's changed, right? Like I see people and I'm very purposeful about smiling. But I think the big things for me have really been thinking about, my impact on the world, small or large. Is really like, how do I create impact? And I said this at the beginning, but I really want to reiterate, each and every one of us in this world is in a community, and every single person is part of the equation. We all matter, and we all make a difference with our actions every day. it's an embarrassing story, but I walk my dog in this area near my apartment, very close, just about a block away. And she always pees in this planter. And the planter sits outside of a school. It always looks really crappy. And I let her pee there because she takes a million years to go to the bathroom. That's a different story. But one evening last week, I was walking with her and I was about to let her go to the bathroom. And this couple walks by and I'm on the phone with my headphones in, just like ready to have her go so we can go to bed. And they walk by and they're like, please, please don't let her pee in there. We just spent a lot of time and money actually getting someone to come and put in tulips. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And it is such a small thing, but it makes such a huge difference. And I walked away and I will never let her do that again, first of all. But second, I realized like, oh my God, these are my neighbors. These people live near me and they were right around the corner and they care about the neighborhood. And so do I. And I was also so struck at their kindness because some people would yell at you and be like, get that dog out of my planter. And instead they just said, please don't do that. And I was like, oh, I just have so much respect. And again, like this feeling of reverence and honoring that we're all here in this community together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really that feeling of solidarity. And that is something that has really struck me. I mean, we talk a lot about compassion on this podcast. And even, something that I find meaning in right now is just taking care of our bodies, right? And I'll get to that in a moment. But I'm on an email distribution for a lot of different fitness centers and group fitness classes around New York City. And it is just amazing to see what people are doing in terms of solidarity. So closing down shop before it was even mandatory to really show that they want to help contain the spread of this virus, and then paying their employees, their studio managers, their instructors, and really taking out money from the corporate and not and foregoing salary to pay the people who typically would be working during this time. I mean, it is so beautiful, really, to see the humanity come out in a time of this. And when I look at this terrible virus, there's a lot of darkness. And when we talk about the lightness, I just see such a sense of unity. This is one thing that we have in common with the entire world right now. And world, planet Earth, right? Because you and I, we could go in a different direction here with the world, but on planet Earth, this is the one thing we all have in common. And when was that the case, right? Like we cannot go into politics right now, but there's probably a lot that we could say and the differences that people have in terms of countries and so forth and opinions. But this is unity and to see humanity show up for one another in such a compassionate way is just, it really fills my heart.
And I want to go back to two things, Jackie, because that was such a beautifully put statement that this is one of the first times we all see our commonality, right? Because we've always had it. We just didn't want to see it. And now we're all experiencing it. Like that's such a beautiful thing to think about, that every single one of us probably feels a sense of a little bit of fear, right? Or maybe a lack of safety. Every single one of us wants hope right now. Every single one of us wants to be joyful. Every single one of us wakes up and doesn't really know how they're going to feel today. And, we all have the option to choose more joy too. So there's like that beautiful way of bringing all of us together. And something else you shared about the studios goes in with what I've heard a lot of people say and have done myself. But, for those of us who are still fortunate enough to have a job, to be on a salary, to know that no matter what, we're probably going to keep our roles and get paid every 2 weeks, just to consider who relies on your money, who relies on the downstream effect of your money. And so one of the things you mentioned is paying the people who are still not necessarily working in the studio, but they work for the studio. For me, that contribution has been paying my dog walker. I don't need to have him come, but I'm going to pay him because I recognize he's running a business on his own that relies on my money, right? And so this economy only works if we all look at it in a united way.
It's so true. And you talked about, you may have mentioned this before about contribution, and you did, because you said like contributing in the way that you can, or small ways or large ways, whatever you can do. And if you are getting paid on a biweekly basis and your job is intact, how can you give back, right? In a monetary way to people that need it. And then of course in non-monetary ways as well. I know you mentioned as a life coach, you're offering some pro bono work, which is amazing. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, there are people who really do depend on services. It's like the service industry, and how can we help them in times like these? I think that's wonderful. In terms of the taking care of our body, I do want to just point on this. So, to our listeners who have been up to date with some of the things that we've talked about here, I've talked about my desire to cook more and how I have in the past tried to cook more and it hasn't lasted. I will say that coronavirus has made me a cook, and which has really helped in terms of the food intake for my body and my health in terms of portion control. And I'm really deciding what to make, how to make it, what ingredients I'm putting in, how often I'm eating. It's of course I can do all these things outside of the house, but I just feel way more on top of it and in control while I'm in my house. And then exercising as well. I've never really done at-home workouts, but recognizing the need to get up and stretch throughout the day. The other day, in the middle of the day, I just had this urge to dance. So I put on like a 15-minute dance workout and just was dancing around my apartment. And it was so fun. And it gave me a lot of energy, that burst that I really needed to get me through the remainder of the day working from home. And
Love
so
that.
really, like, when we're finding this stillness in being at home, how can you find movement and really take care of that physical body in addition to your mind and your spirit in terms of the inner work that we were talking about before?
Yeah, I love the dancing, Jackie. I turned on some happy jazz on Spotify. If anyone's heard the happy jazz playlist, it's amazing. And just danced around. I was like, this is actually what needed to happen anyway. I should have always been doing this.
Yeah.
And I love that we've talked about cooking and how you wanted to become a cook, and now it's sort of like, well, here you are. This is it. How cool is that? And now you don't ever have to go back, right? You can always say, like, I started cooking during COVID, and I'm going to keep this up beyond this point. And I think for me, one of the really important routines that I've relied on, and something I recognize that I think for all of our listeners is valuable. We're in, like Jackie said earlier, how many times has anyone said we are in unprecedented times? And because we're in crisis, one of the most important things you can do is create a sense of normalcy for yourself. And normalcy comes with routine. As you're thinking about how you spend your time, think about how you might take your routine and continue it and get even stronger in the routine that you want to maintain. The reason is, that allows you to maintain this kind of steady stream of life is still the same. Yes, there's a lot going on around me, but I can still maintain. So for me, that's my mornings, where I wake up in the morning, and every morning I have my coffee, I meditate. Do meditate first, coffee second, because that would be a scary sight to try to meditate after caffeine. But meditate, coffee, walking my dog, running, writing, reading, and then getting into work and life. And so however you frame your routine is great, but maintain that as best as you can, because that will bring you back to, the normal life that you are craving.
I love that. And hopefully after all this is over, that normalcy will become the norm, right? When things start
Right.
to pick up in terms of speed. And I want to kind of pull this out like bird's eye view a little bit, because we've been talking a lot about the individual and how staying put can allow you to be and make the most of this time and do things that really nourish and fulfill you as a human being. And yet, when we do this as individuals, we actually see a huge impact in the world, in the planet. So, for example, there have been articles that have shown the air pollution in China has significantly decreased over the past few months due to coronavirus. Or in Venice, right, the canals are way clearer to the point where you can actually see fish in the canals. And typically you cannot even see, a few inches down within those canals. So there's actually this really meta way of looking how every single person, if you stay put and really go back to basics, what that will do for the collective planet. Again, that almost like that common humanity, unity type of focus, and the effects that we're actually seeing in the physical world.
Yeah, and it's happening everywhere. Anywhere that there's a shutdown or a slowdown, so you can see it in Seoul, South Korea, you can see it in Italy, you can see it in the US, the pollution levels have massively dropped. It's sort of like, I look at it as like the universe is telling us, stop. And now we can never go back to pretending that climate change isn't real or that we have an impact on this world, right? We can never go back, because once you've seen it, you can't unsee it. And so I'd encourage anybody listening to, you're looking for light. That is amazing light. We have been polluting this planet for a long time. And to see that in a matter of months, we can shift that, like, what could we do in a few years?
Yeah. And you touched on something, what did you say? The universe is maybe telling us something, right? So much of this, like does our world need this right now? I know it's so awful, and it's devastating what's going on with our economy and the small businesses, people's 401ks, and I mean everything that we've created as human beings in this world. And yet, is this a sign of some sort? Is there some deeper meaning that the universe is trying to tell us? Because when we do take a step back and sit and pause, look at some of the goodness that is coming out of it. And the nature piece is, I mean, nature is what creates balance in this entire universe. So like that is because the physicality of that is so strong right now in terms of the changes we're seeing, like that is clear, right? And so then it's like, okay, what do we need to learn, right? Like, what can we learn from this experience, and what can we do, and how can we be to make the most of it? And then the next part is really how do we stay with that, right? After all of this is over, hopefully it won't go on for too long, and we take the right steps and precautions to, minimize this spread. But what do we do to kind of make this stick?
Yeah, and there's we've been talking a lot about slowing down and how to be, and you bring up for me the question of each individual asking themselves what matters most, and then as a collective, all of us asking ourselves what matters most, right? And what we're seeing as a collective is what matters most is how we treat this planet, right? That's one of the most important things. And then as individuals, one of the ways that I like to think about this is something that James Clear talks about in his book called Atomic Habits, which we've talked about a few times on this podcast. It's an incredibly powerful book. And one of the things that James talks about is when we have a goal, oftentimes we want something, right? So we want to lose 10 pounds. And we say, okay, great, I'm going to lose 10 pounds. And then we go about doing all of it, and we wake up next month and we haven't done anything different, or we break our quote unquote diet or exercise routine within a few days. And one of the challenges that he talks about is the fact that we may want something, but first we have to change our identity. And so when you think about changing your identity, it's about becoming the kind of person who does X, who cooks, right, Jackie, who runs every day, who does yoga, who is working on their weight control, who is saving money, whatever that is. The reason we've gotten to where we are is because we don't believe we're the kind of person who does cook, or who does save money, or who does run every day, or whatever your goal is. And so we've got to first change our identity. And the way that we do that is in slow steps. So in this way of talking about slowing down, it's saying, all right, if I wanted to, I'll stick with the weight loss example. If I wanted to lose weight, what would someone who wanted to lose weight do? How do I slowly and surely become that kind of person over a long period of time? So I'd actually also say, along with slowing down, this period is teaching patience, right? We want so much to have things happen quickly for us. And right now it's not, right? We're just sitting ducks waiting to figure out when we're going to be free and the world's going to be healthy again. But we've got to learn the patience and the drawing out. And oftentimes when you have patience and you draw things out over time, it means you actually cement real habits when it comes to building habits, instead of just doing something like a crash diet. That's why most people's diets don't work. So just thinking about right now for you listeners, what is something that's incredibly important to you that you could take during this time? Who do you believe you are today, and who would you need to believe you were? And what tiny little step can you take to start becoming more the person you want to be? So, I've used this example before, but still love it. A guy who said he wanted to lose 100 pounds, instead of just going out and literally only buying vegetables, getting a gym membership and going to the gym every single day and wearing himself down by the second week, he said, I'm just going to put on my shoes, my gym shoes. I'm going to drive to the gym. I'm going to stay for 5 minutes. That's all I'm going to do for the first few weeks. And that's it. And then I'm going to up it and stay for 10, and then for 20, and then I become the kind of person. So give yourself that space, because we've got it, and the patience.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the kind of attachment to your identity, because it's us, right? And it's who we are, not just the things that we are doing. That's a really, really good practice. And that's a great book.
Yeah, and it's who we believe ourselves to be, right? And that's the thing about identity, is it's not actually true. And the reality is we can change our identities. It's just that we have to change something very deep in our ingraining and who we believe ourselves to be. So Jackie and I found a really amazing quote that we wanted to share with our listeners. And you may have heard this, seen this, it's been all over social media, but it's really beautiful. And we wanted to share it with you so we can hopefully, again, give you some hope as you go through this time period. Just know we are wishing the absolute best for you. So the quote is by Kitty O'Mara, and it goes like this: And the people stayed home and read books and listened and rested and exercised and made art and played games and learned new ways of being and were still and listened more deeply. Some meditated, some prayed, some danced, some met their shadows, and the people began to think differently.
And the people healed. And in the absence of people living in ignorant, dangerous, mindless, and heartless ways, the earth began to heal.
And when the danger passed and the people joined together again, they grieved their losses and made new choices and dreamed new images and created new ways to live and heal the earth fully as they had been healed.
Oh, so beautiful. And to our listeners, I really believe, we believe that quote sums up what we all hope for you during this time, that you can take this time to really thrive and ask yourself, how will you thrive in this time of crisis?
Thank you so much for joining us on the journey. We are going to be back every 2 weeks. We're still recording, we're still going. So keep joining us. We're here with you, we're here for you, and wishing you all the best. If you want some more in the arena during this time, encourage you to check us out on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play under In the Arena LinkedIn. And thanks so much for being with us.
Thank you, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you back here soon.
Amen.